Hi, folks. Welcome to my discussion of Angela's Ashes, chapters 3 through 7. I am just going to keep it on this screen the whole time because I'm recording in the late evening and I don't look the way that you would see me at school. And also, I apologize if you can hear my upstairs neighbors. They're the loudest people I've ever met in my life. And clearly, they've just got like lead weights in their feet or something. They're horrible. Okay, so chapter 3 is right after, it starts right after the twins have died. Both of them have died, Oliver first and then Eugene. And so they decided they have to move again because Angela just cannot deal with being in the same room where her kids died and where they had all these memories. So they decide to move again. They think their new place is going to be pretty great, except it turns out to be next to the community toilet, which is not so great. I think that speaks a little bit more to their poverty, the fact that they have literally never lived anywhere that has a toilet inside and like in their apartment or in their house. They've always had to either have they think that a hall bathroom is like the height of luxury at this point. And they have used chamber pots. They've had like a bathroom for the whole building, but they've never had one of their own. So at this point, Malaki Sr. is kind of up to his old ways. He still cannot get a job, but all the money he's getting from the dole and everything, he's basically spending it all at the pub or on other drinks. And in this chapter, we also learn a little bit more about Pa Keating, who is kind of turning out to be a better provider than Malaki, to be honest, or a better sort of male role model. He takes the boys to the pub on Christmas, not to watch him drink his money away, as Malaki Sr. might do, but when they send the kids out to find some coal for their fire, Pa Keating takes them to the pub and buys them some stuff and then asks the guy who works at the pub if he has some extra coal to spare for these poor, cold, starving children on Christmas. And they do, and they agree to give the boy some coal. So Pa Keating kind of provides for them. Also in chapter 3, there's a new baby, Michael, which is a good thing in several ways. Number one, it's probably going to help relieve some of the sadness that everybody's feeling from losing the twins. It'll be nice to have a new baby, but also that means that they can have more money from the dole. The more kids you have, the more money you get from the government. At the end of that chapter, Malaki does have a job for a brief time at the cement factory, but he oversleeps, and he oversleeps because he's been out drinking the night before, and he sleeps past work and gets fired again. The more that this happens, it's just like a vicious cycle, because obviously Malaki knows that no one is very content. Everyone is more or less starving, except for him, because I don't know if you realized this earlier, but like several times they mentioned the fact that he does not really eat. He says that something like food makes you weak, or like it weakens your constitution or something like that, but he just like barely eats. He drinks a lot more than he eats, which is super not healthy. And he's also spending money that the family could be spending on other things. It even mentions at one point that they do not have money for candles for the kids to like see to do their homework at night and stuff. So he's really kind of messing things up for the family. Moving on to chapter 4, we learn a good bit about the role that religion plays, because Frank I'm not sure how old he is here. But he is preparing for his first confession and first communion. I'm not Catholic, so I'm not sure at what age people usually do that. He's very young at this point. He'd have to be like later on, he's 9. And then there's like been a 3-year time jump between there. So how in the world Frank McCourt could remember all of this vividly enough to write a memoir about it? Oh, excuse me. It's frankly, no pun intended, frankly beyond me. So he's getting prepared for first confession, first communion, which is a big deal for little boys in the Catholic Church. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. Frank's teacher keeps telling him that good Catholics are prepared to die for the faith. And in fact, it would be a glorious thing to die for the faith. And Frank asks himself the same question that I was thinking when it got to that part, which was, why does everyone want him to die, or want to make him like promise to die, or like be excited to die for some cause? Like every time his dad is drunk, he wakes him up in the middle of the night and makes him promise to die for Ireland. And now the teacher is saying that it would be a great thing to die for the faith. And when you're, 6 or 7 years old, you just probably are not as connected to like country or religion as an older person, especially one who has like been in the church forever or has fought in wars, as they're going to be. So like this poor little boy is just feeling like everybody wants him to die for some cause and he doesn't get it. Then they talk about a thing called the collection, which is basically like after your first communion and first confession, relatives and neighbors and other people in the church give you money and sweets, and like people spend their money on things that they enjoy, like the movies. We know that Frank likes going to the movies, so that's what his plan is. And the thing that he's going to confess was actually pretty funny. His friend, whose name is escaping me at the moment, told him a dirty story about Cahulan, and he felt like it was a sin to have listened to it. And so he's going to confess the sin of listening to dirty stories, but he's worried about it because he's afraid that the priest is going to tell everybody about it. And not that he will be embarrassed that everybody knows this story, or knows what he did wrong, but that he won't get any sweets during the collection or any money. And I mean, that just kind of speaks to like kid brain. There's not a whole lot of logic there. Like if you're going to be worried about confessing it, you would think that his fear would be like, oh no, the priest is going to tell anyone. They're all going to think that I'm like a dirty sinner or something. But he's like, no. I'm worried that he'll tell everybody and then I won't get any sweets or money during the collection. But it actually winds up that he doesn't have to worry about that, because he takes his first communion and in a little bit he throws up the communion wafers and the breakfast that he had at his grandma's house, and she freaks out about it and starts yelling about how like God is in their backyard, because of course they think that the communion wafers are like actually the body of Christ. And if he has thrown it up all over her backyard, it's like disrespectful and kind of like profane or sacrilegious to have done that. And she's concerned about God being all over the backyard. And then she makes him like go back to confess what happened, to confess that that he threw up God in the backyard. And by the time they get back to church, it's too late for the collection. Poor Frank. That was all he wanted in the first place. But he sneaks into the cinema anyway, so he actually had a pretty good first communion. In chapter 5, moving on, Grandma is still freaked out about God in the backyard, and she like holds it against the whole family, basically. She won't talk to them. She won't help them out. And I think, again, that kind of speaks to like the power of religion. She's so it's like she's almost superstitious about religion. I mean, poor little Frank couldn't help throwing up, but she kind of sees that as a big enough deal to be mad about it, mad enough to not talk to Angela or the others. This chapter is also where we meet Bill Galvin, who's the lodger at Grandma's house, and Grandma always walks his dinner down to where he works. And at some point, I think it's Angela is like, hey, I have a better idea. Why don't you pay Frank a little bit and he'll do it for you instead? And it seems nice to like give Frank a job. So somebody's making some money in this family. But it doesn't work out because Frank is like irresistibly drawn to Bill's food on the way there, and he eats it all. He eats all of Bill's dinner before he can get it to him. Let's see what else happens before that little time jump. Angela and Malaki both have to get dentures because all of the smoking has rotted their teeth and they have fallen out, and so they have to get dentures. And then as a result of that, like, I think it's kind of gross to think about now, but the kids are like trying on their dentures, like putting them in their mouths, and poor little Malaki Jr. gets one of the sets of teeth stuck in his mouth, and they have to take him to the hospital to have him removed. What a fiasco. Frank also takes Irish dance lessons during this point, but surprise, surprise, he starts skipping them so he can go to the movies instead. He does love the movies, and he got kind of hoodwinked into those Irish dance lessons. And once they find out that he's been skipping his dance lessons, they send him to confession, which he points out seems to be the solution for everything. At the end of chapter 5, there's a bit of a time jump of 3 years, during which Malaki, surprisingly, still can't hold down a job. And I think the only other thing in that chapter really is at the very end, Malaki is wanting Frank to become an altar boy, but he like shows up to basically apply for the position, and the priest takes one look at him, and just from the look of him, how poor he is, how like low class he is and everything, he's like, oh, we don't have any more room for altar boys, sorry, and sends Frank packing. So he gets rejected by this priest. Chapter 6, we meet Fenton Slattery, which is such a great name. All of Frank's classmates have really fun names, like Fenton Slattery and Question Quigley. This story with Fenton Slattery, like the teacher always has an apple peel that he gives to students. I don't know why the peel is so appealing. I didn't even mean to make that joke before it was halfway out of my mouth. But at one point, Fenton gets the apple peel, and he gives it to Frank and one of their other friends, and he invites them over for lunch. But he's also presumably pretty poor, and he does not have enough for everyone. He eats his sandwich himself and doesn't actually give Frank or the other kid anything. And this, it might seem kind of weird, but back in the day, not just in Ireland, all over the place, when it came lunchtime at school, the kids would just like walk home and go eat lunch at home and then come back to school. And that was really common. And that's what happened here, or they walked to Fenton Slattery's house for lunch, and there wasn't lunch. Because he and the other kid are like starving. Patty Closey, that's the other kid. They skip school and like go to this field or like a farm or something nearby, and they have apples and they drink milk straight out of a cow, which I can't imagine what that must be like. I've never had milk straight out of a cow. And when his parents do find out that he was skipping school, and he's like, oh, I'm not going home to face their wrath. And so instead, he goes to Patty's house and kind of hides out. And he meets Mr. Closey, who knew his mom when they were young and like has lovely things to say about her and about how like she used to sing and everything. But he has the consumption, which for those of you who don't know is tuberculosis, and was a big deal and easily killed people back then. It's much more treatable now. People do get it. In fact, one of my very best friends had it at one point. She is Australian, and I don't know if it's like more common in Australia. But actually, I'm just trying to remember now if she had it like during the time when she was living in Australia or when she was living here, and I can't recall. But she did have tuberculosis, and she had to be on pills for like a year. So it's still serious, but much more easily treated. Back then, it was like pretty much a death sentence. But Angela comes to fetch Frank and meets her old friend, Mr. Closey, and he gets her to sing, and by the end, she's just like weeping over Patty's family situation and his dad, and also kind of about her own situation and about how things have gone so poorly for her, and like reflecting on her past now that she's got her like old friend in front of her. This is, I think I mentioned this before, this is one of a bunch of times actually throughout the novel where poor Angela is just kind of like sitting there crying, weeping about the situation her life is in. And, you know, you really feel bad for her. I do. And then lastly, chapter 7, which it does specify that Frank is 9 at this point. Like I said, it was like after this 3-year time jump. So it didn't specify like when he turned 6 or was he 5? I don't know. But he's 9 in chapter 7, and still their situation is like same old, basically, with Malaki spending all their money, not being able to hold down a job. They are struggling to make ends meet, struggling to feed themselves. That's kind of their constant situation. We also meet Mickey. I'm guessing you pronounce his last name Spellacy, which is not a last name I've ever heard, but you meet him in this chapter, and he is the kid who asks Frank and his friends to pray that his consumptive sister doesn't die until school starts back, because if she dies after school starts back, he'll be able to get some time off school, which is pretty cold-hearted. And but I mean, they're 9. I don't know many 9-year-olds, but I don't think they're particularly like emotionally in tune with things. But Mickey says that if they do that, if they pray that his sister will like last through the beginning of the school year, then he'll invite them to the wake, and that will be great because they can have sweets there and lots of food and stuff. Well, Mickey is a little jerk because he kind of reneges on his promise. She does die like 2 days after the start of the school year or something, so maybe their prayers worked, but Mickey does not invite them to the wake as promised. What a little jerk. A couple of items of good news in this chapter. Frank gets a job for a minute. He starts helping his Uncle Pat deliver papers, and through that he meets Mr. Timony, and Mr. Timony wants him to read to him, so he does. He actually reads, it specifies that he reads A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift, and we'll actually read that a little later in the year, I believe. It's basically a satire about how to solve the problem of so many starving people and overpopulation in Ireland, they should just start eating children, because then it feeds people and also cuts down on the population. Like I said, it's a satire. It's not meant to be taken literally, but very, very popular at the time and even now. But he gets fired fairly quickly from that job because Pat thinks that he can find another kid to do it for like far less. And the last item of this chapter is that they have another baby, Alphonsus Joseph. What a name. Which, if you think about it, so we've got Frank, we've got Malaki, we had the twins, we had Margaret, now we have Michael, and now we have Alphonsus Joseph.
It's 9 o'clock.
Thank you. So she's given birth 7 times, which is, goodness me, that's a lot. And now she's only got 4 kids left. So it's just man, just the whole thing of like having so many kids in the first place and then losing 3 of them and not being able to support the ones that you do have. Like, the best part of having a kid for them is probably the fact that they get more money for the government for it. There's just like really some roller coasters. And then it ends this chapter by telling us that Malaki, to no one's surprise, spends the money that was given as the baby's gift in the pub. And I think at the end it says that like Frank can't find his dad. He was looking for his dad and like asking people at the pub and stuff and telling them like, oh, we have a new baby at home and he had this money and he brought it here to spend it. And one of the guys says, a man that drinks the money for a new baby is gone beyond the beyonds, kind of just implying that Malaki is sort of a hopeless case at this point. And maybe he is, because this kind of stuff has been going on for ages and ages, and he has not gotten any better. He knows how much it hurts his family, both emotionally and literally, physically, because spending the money that's meant to be spent on food is definitely harmful to his family. So Malaki, it's not like he doesn't have any good points. He does, and I don't think that Frank really speaks about him with any malice, but it's just kind of matter of fact, like, this is the way Dad behaved, and because of that, it really contributed to our level of poverty. So that's pretty much it for these chapters, just to give you like a little summary and some minor, very minor analysis there about some of the ups and downs they have, the importance of religion, Angela's sort of like constant disappointment with her own life and sort of gloominess about the state of things, Malaki's constant alcoholism issues, and you know, how out of whack his priorities are. Those are some of the big things from these chapters. So next time we'll talk about chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.